Shut up and sit down.
By all means, go for it. Have fun. Just leave me alone.
People are coming together more and more and more and more as the government has been failing us more and more.
I'm against being shitty to people.
You can't research your way into understanding somebody.
One way or another, I'd rather have the fight now.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Fight for Liberty Live. Tonight, we are going to be talking to someone, you might call him the most radical podcaster in the Liberty movement. But first, we got to update you guys. Nug of Knowledge, they're out here doing awesome stuff, selling you the best quality premium CBD Delta 8 THC products you can get online, legal in all 50 states-ish, but definitely sell to you in all 50 states. So go online to nugofknowledge.com, use promo code F4L. You'll get 10% off your first order. And you'll be supporting not only this show, but all the other shows on Free Speech Media, as well as other cool people in the Liberty movement that work on this project. So go on over, check them out. Also, TOMFOR52.com is the place to go to find out about Tom Queter. He's running for New York State Senate in the 52nd District. At least that's where we think he'll be. They're still working on redistricting so that they can try to screw us over as much as they possibly can. But definitely go on to that website. Also, there's a link in the description to both his website and a donate link so you can go support an awesome, exciting campaign here in New York. But tonight, like I said, we have an awesome guest. He ran for Senate in Georgia. Now he's running for governor. He's done a whole bunch of awesome things, and you've seen him on the show before. Glad to have him back. Shane Hazel, welcome back to the show.
Brother, good to be back. How are you, Mr. Fite?
I'm doing well. Starting to settle down. I'm staying put most likely between now and the end of the year because just staying home for the holidays and everything. So starting to settle. How have you been? Long time no see.
I know, man. The world's changed quite a bit. I think even since the last time we got to hang out, man, it's, I guess we could have predicted this moment, but trying to stay as optimistic as I can. And, I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic in this time. We've got a fight ahead of us. I'm not going to lie, but, I think, for all intents and purposes, man, I'm pretty optimistic about what's going on in the liberty movement and in this country. I mean, there's a lot of rejection of the narrative. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I was a little bit worried as to how much the quote unquote sheeple would be the leading force. And I mean, obviously they have been to a point, but we're seeing a lot of people waking up this year and last year, and it can only get worse for the establishment in that area.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're going to try to make it worse for us in the meantime, but we've got some good fallback plans this time around that I don't think they have an answer for, brother. So yeah, all good.
Yeah. So you do point out an interesting piece that it has been quite a while since you were back on the show. That was back in May. So a lot of things have changed. But I do want to I don't actually have a whole lot of questions or notes written because I mostly want to try to continue conversation that we started back in May. And decided that it would have derailed the entire podcast episode. So we kept talking about your Senate race instead. But we were talking about the criminalization of both cannabis and other psychedelic and entheogenic medicines. And you were saying that you think that was an intentional kind of stopping us from being able to move forward in our evolution to where maybe by this point in time we would have evolved past the need for a government or be well on our way to being there. And you think that this was intentional to stop us from doing that. I agree. And I want to hear more on that.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the guy Brian Maraska, I think is how you say his name. The immortality key. There's just some things you have to experience, right? In terms of psychedelics, and that's the thing is there are secondhand opinions, and then there are people who have actually gone and seen, and to see is to understand just how much you don't understand. But it also gives you an understanding of wait a second, right? Like, holy shit. What I was told that this stuff was between and for your audience, I mean, I'm strictly speaking from my own experience, psilocybin and cannabis, the different forms, especially of cannabis out there in terms of edibles and high concentrate THC type stuff. The once you see, right, you're like, well, man, like this isn't anything like what they told me it was going to be. The whole, we're on drugs, just say no, dare, all these ridiculous government indoctrination programs. You're like, I didn't have any urge to do anything stupid. I really just wanted to chill out. And really, if you do these things under care and, especially like, the way I had, man, I was just like, this is incredible, like incredible in a way that is so spiritual that you'll never ever forget it. And I think that's the thing. Is I was a guy that had kind of divorced myself from religion, prior to going down this road. And because the narrative was just falling apart all around me in this world, everything that I'd ever been told was just falling apart around me. I was like, oh, I'm sure a lot of this other stuff that they told me is going to fall apart too. And it obviously did. But what I found after doing it was a thirst for knowledge, right? Like, why, why in the world, or who in the world, I should say, was the driving force behind making psychedelics criminal? And I'll tell you, thank God for the great horse deworming Joe Rogan, right? He had this guy Brian Maraska on, and a bunch of people that listen to my show. I had asked for great books, and they're like, "You got to read The Immortality Key." And once I had seen Brian on Joe's show, I'd seen some clips here and there, but I really didn't dive into it. And the episode doesn't do his book any justice. The book itself, man, for anybody who's out there that hasn't seen or read this book, I first of all, I recommend you listen to it, because the brain in Brad's head is absolutely a 12-pound brain, right? And at any point, cut me off, but this man is a classically trained linguist, right? So he can go in and out of ancient language, read it, speak it. One minute you'll be listening to him talk about things in Italian dialects or Latin or Spanish or or even ancient Aramaic, right? And then you'll also have him go into the Germanic type of languages, and I mean just fluidly, as if it was his second nature. And I think it definitely was. He is not somebody who has ever participated in psychedelics, because he wanted his research to be that of a place of fact finding and purity, and not a bias. So you go through ancient history, and in terms of how ancient civilizations used to get together, and really put together concoctions from wheat, a lot of times, which would grow things like ergot, which is a fungus, and they'd go and they'd trip balls, right? And I mean, the thing is it was these giant events where they would go out and they'd absolutely have these giant spiritual homages, where they were just at one with each other. And after going through a lot of the texts, they referred to it as the glue that kept humanity together, right? Like, this is an amazing time. It's no doubt that when you talk about advancements in civilization, and the ability of humans to work together, instead of just crush each other skulls and fight for resources, these guys took a step back and they said, hey, you know what, I see those guys as human beings over there that are my equals, and maybe I should probably do some very libertarian type principles, right? Like, not hurt them, not use force and coercion against them. But this happened all over the place. This happened throughout the Middle East. It happened throughout their Germanic lands. It happened throughout the the lands that are now considered your Spain's and Italy and northern horns of Africa, and I mean all of these places. And as he progresses through the ages and describes the different type of psychedelics, he really starts to answer the question, like I asked earlier, is all right. So, at what point did this become bad, right, immoral, or forbidden, and who did it? And sure as hell, it gets to the church, the quote unquote first church, the Catholic Church, and he has access. He has access to some very forbidden areas, or I should say, at least lockdown areas, right? And so he goes in with all of his study and being a good Catholic, for most of his life, and he goes through this place with a fine tooth comb, and he finds the story of this saint. I think it's Brandon is the name of who was persecuted, I think, in the 1600s.
Let's go, Brandon.
That's right, for putting out the understanding that, hey, no, like these ancient civilizations were definitely involved in psychedelics, and this was a passageway for the people out there to be together and to be with what the universe couldn't explain. And I was just like, oh my gosh, well, they killed that guy, right? Like they killed this man of the church, Father Brandon, I think, and don't quote me on his name, but I think that's what his name is. And then it tells the story of quote unquote some witches, and these witches were burnt, murdered, basically, for taking a lot of the ergot type punch and everything else that they would serve to people, like communion, and they were killed for it, right? Like, and this is all buried within the Catholic Church. They know it happened, and they made a decision to bury it. And then you ask the question, well, why would that be? Of course, the answer is, if you can make people come to you as the church, and you can continue with the stories of the miraculous psychedelics, but basically neuter them, take all of the psychoactiveness out of them, and replace them with regular wine and some bread instead of a mushroom, right? What you get is a sterilized version of spirituality that's completely run through one organization at the time for power and control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's interesting that this is pre 1776, so, and obviously pre like Nixon or any of the people that we as libertarians are normally shitting on when we're talking about the war on drugs. Like, this one's a little bit.
Oh, this one's terrible, man. Like, this goes all the way to the top, right?
To the tippy top. Yeah, and because if you allow other people to have access to quote unquote God, then you don't get to have that like control over the market, that monopoly on deity, the way that the Catholic Church did. I mean, then that's one of the reasons why the Reformation happened and why Protestantism came around, because that's part of what they were fighting. But I feel like what we're talking about here is like they didn't fight it quite hard enough, because they didn't realize quite what they were fighting. They got back that personal relationship with God part, but not how to maybe get that relationship started.
Yeah, and I think Brian did a really good job of pointing out that and it was probably Paul Stamets, I think, who wrote the foreword on this, who is probably one of the leading minds within the psychedelic circles, right? So at any rate, when he talked about this, he said, spirituality is not something you just hear about and do. It's people can talk about it who have never done it and will never get it. It's one of those things that takes a life lesson and really a walk down that path. And it can be a little one, or it could be something that you devote your life to in controlled ways as well. And there's obviously a continuum there, but Yeah, it's absolutely one of those things that if people are looking for a closer relationship with the mysteries of the universe, right? Like to go and know instead of hearing and quote unquote believing. Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that is so powerful. That yeah, they couldn't leave it to chance, man. They had to start throwing people in cages and raiding their homes and killing them for plants and fungus, which who knows, man, maybe it's an alien species that alien technology that was meant for us to help develop. I don't know, but I'll tell you right now, like that's the beautiful thing about, I think, a lot of those psychedelic things is you are comfortable with not knowing the answers. You're quite comfortable with going, wow, it's so complex and so beautiful and so such a revelation for the mind. It's not one of those things that you have to have an answer to. You just go,
Mhm.
cool, man, like this is something unique and it's personal, and it's also a shared experience depending on who you're with, who you're around, or who else is I, for lack of a better term, a seer, like somebody who's
Mm.
been there and then who's done those kind of things.
Yeah, I like how you said, that it gives you that comfortability with not knowing. I think one of the coolest mindsets that I came to after or noticed after probably at least a half a dozen times tripping or so. There was a time where I was like, I was coming down and I was kind of like thinking back over some of all the weird tangents my brain had gone off on. And I was tripping with one of my or two of my good friends who are both like really deep philosophical anarchists as well. So all sorts of stuff. And I came back across like a big question and that had never gotten answered. And I was just like, well, I guess I'll figure that out in the next trip, and just kind of like moved on. And then I thought back on it and I was like, normal me, like the typical me, me that's not on some sort of psychedelics would never be able to just move on past a question that freaking quickly. Like, just like, oh, guess I'll figure that out in a month or so. Like, who cares?
Yeah, it's that
Gives you
quiet
that
patience,
freedom.
right?
Hmm.
Yeah, you're like, oh no, it's gonna be there. Like it's gonna be like the answer that you're seeking is gonna be there when the time is right too. Like there's this like I always had, I think, this understanding of faith. Like when times are bad, you just have to kind of sit back into it, take a deep breath, and trust and or know that it's going to be okay. And you can exercise that muscle long enough. And to it, I would say, at a very healthy degree as well. But once you've seen, and then you were like, oh yeah, no, everything is going to be fine. Like we're, you know, I hate to say it, but like in terms of our existence on this plane or dimension or whatever it is, you just sit there and go, this is so insignificant to
Hmm.
everything else. The answers are out there, and I'm sure that when my ego or whatever it is can handle the answers is probably when they'll be presented, right? And not before, and that's okay.
Yeah. Uh, and I think psychedelics also taught me the lesson of like letting go, because you kind of have to learn it if you're gonna trip correctly, right? If so
Can't
I
fight it.
yeah, I got into almost all of the substances that I've ever used, except for psychedelics. I got into during like my late teens, early 20s in like party scenes where, the goal is who like at a frat party, the real competition that no one's talking about is who can have the most alcohol and look the soberest. Right? That's like no one wants to be the drunk asshole, but no one wants to be the pussy that said no to their 27th drink. So you're always trying to walk that line. And I found myself doing the same thing a lot with cannabis. It's like, oh yeah, I never say no to weed, like never tap out. Like if someone passes you the blunt, you always hit it. But try to still be kind of sober minded, know what's going on, not be stopped at a stop sign waiting for it to turn green. Right. with psychedelics, you cannot go into it with that kind of a mindset. If you're trying to pretend you're sober and you're not tripping, you'll have a really bad time. And I had never even tried to exercise that muscle of the like let go, let it happen. Just, your eyes are going to do trippy things. You don't know what's reality and what's not. Deal with it for 8 hours. That kind of a mindset was not something I've ever even tested, let alone experienced. But now,
I'm still here, buddy.
without psychedelics, I've gotten better at that kind of a mindset when sober, just thanks to the use of psychedelics and being able to exercise that muscle while tripping.
Yeah, I mean, the let go, right? Like that let go muscle it's counterintuitive to, I think, human nature in general, especially in the culture and the indoctrination that we were brought up in, especially here in the United States, right? It's like
Mhm.
you got to be in control of your facilities at all time. Um, I think this is such I don't know, a tired see through, especially once you've done once you've seen, is when you do let go, especially, and I definitely, I recommend doing this with somebody who is experienced, who can guide you, who's responsible. And for me, man, it's like, go to a good place, a quiet place, something that's natural to you, where you're very comfortable. And the the outdoors isn't going to be comfortable for everybody. Sitting in the wood, in the middle of the woods, in different places, might not even be a smart thing, depending on what kind of wildlife you got there. Like, don't go
Mhm.
out to Alaska in the spring and sit there and eat mushrooms, right? Like, there are hungry ass bears out there. But up here in
Mhm.
places like North Georgia or Appalachian, right? Like, there's very few things out there in the woods that want to even approach a man who's
Mhm.
sitting in the woods or something like that. But if you're not comfortable in that space, and you're more comfortable in, say, an urban setting or in an apartment, whatever it is that gives you comfort, the best thing is to learn, at small doses, right? Is
Mhm.
to go in with intention, and to understand that, hey, listen, it's okay to let go. This is what you're going to do. And really, that's, I think, the coolest part, right? Is like, when you figure out you're going to do some work, and you're going to do some work on you. I don't think most people are ready to do work on themselves, right? You're not ready to be wrong. You're not ready to be made a fool. You're not ready to be scared of some of your past, or some of your ideas, or some of your thoughts. And if you're not ready to kind of take those things on, right, the things in your soul, in the back of your brain, I definitely don't recommend
Mhm.
psychedelics, right? Like, but if
Right.
you are, right, if you're going to try to have um a real conversation with yourself, this is an excellent tool for doing such a thing. And the thing is as you work through the continuum, as you continue to approach these, you know these things in your mind, and your soul, and those kind of things, or maybe even your body, um you're gonna do more and more type of work, and your ability to calm yourself and breathe through these things and stay comfortable is gonna pay such dividends too, right? Like, I think this is one of those things, especially when you look back at history, amongst some of the warrior class, right? This is something that those guys did extremely well. And we obviously, in this world, we perverted everything, and the warrior class was one of these classes of people that weren't scared to go in and take a different type of inward journey, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of that stuff is I don't know, front and center in my mind these days, for sure.
Yeah, that's not only been taken out, but almost shut down in our quote unquote warrior class now. You're not supposed to feel feelings or think things. That's not it's not suggested if you're trying to go into the United States military. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, there's a reason alcohol is prevalent and it's not psychedelics.
right. Uh, but you mentioned like lack of fear and kind of being able to be more vulnerable with yourself. And I think that's one of the key things that I've gotten to experience with psychedelics. And one of the things, I think it's important to kind of mix up once you're comfortable. You said like find a place where you're comfortable, especially if you're going to do it for the first time. Find, some people that know what they're doing. Find a place where you'll feel safe. But I've found that, exploring a little bit and doing a little bit more now that I've tripped, I'm not a whole lot, but I'm probably in the low 20s, somewhere like that, where I feel comfortable. It's been an interesting couple of years. It's been yeah, well, I did it almost every other weekend for about 2.5 months straight, so that racked up my numbers pretty well.
Mhm.
Uh, but I very much enjoyed like a couple of times wandering around New York City, or I tripped. I did the most mushrooms I've ever done at the LP Michigan convention. Um, I got a little bit of mushrooms, and then I got quite stoned, and then we were having an after party, and great guy Ben Boren, he just had some stuff, and he just had a bag, and it was like for the room for the party, and so like he got annoyed that I kept asking him for more, and he was like, dude, just like handed me the bag. He was like, dude, just have however much you want. Just fucking just like it's for the room. And so I was just sitting there on the bed. I was talking to Spike, Caitlin Cloven, Ben, a couple other people from the Michigan LP, their newly elected chair, Tim Yao. And I was just popping them because I was stoned and I was a little bit hungry. And I was just like, I got munchies with mushrooms in my hand. And
How many grams do you think?
I really lost count, but I would say I probably had at least a dozen stems and caps, somewhere around there. It was because it was a good like 10 minutes. I was just kind of sitting there like every minute or so, just like popping another. It was and Spike was like leaning over, like, does he know what he's doing? Like, is he okay? Should we stop him?
Yeah, who's watching our man David tonight, right? Like
Right.
just in
The th
case.
the thing is the bag was like I still didn't even make a dent in the bag, like, people still went home with stuff, so I don't feel bad. But it was a good time, some of the best visuals I've ever experienced, but yeah, just that kind of freedom to be yourself and be a little bit more open and a little bit more vulnerable, first with yourself and then with other people, then allows you to be more okay with people being vulnerable with you, and being a little bit more open, understanding, and accepting of other people. And it's kind of this like great trajectory, all around helpful thing that you learn.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where the second part of that comes from, right? Is the glue of humanity is, somebody who's experienced, within themselves now, right? And they know what to
Mhm.
expect depending on dosage. I don't recommend, high dosages of mushrooms
Don't do what I did.
yeah, be still somewhere. And I think that's one of the things maybe we should talk about too, as responsible
Right.
adults, right? Is like, hey, listen, if you're getting into higher dosages of something, and I would definitely say respect what you're doing. This communion of sorts is one of those things that need, like, it commands and demands respect. It's the last thing you want to do is go out there and have a bad experience, right? And then be possibly a bad ambassador. Like, it demands quiet, and it demands a reset and a rest of the body and the mind and the soul and all of those things, in order for you to, I think, maximize that experience. It demands a quiet and a peace a lot of times to do the best work. So, I mean, yeah, I don't know. Maybe if you're low dose, whatever, taking in some visuals, cool. I understand that kind of stuff as well. But
Mhm.
um, for the heavy stuff, I think the other way. But like you were saying, um, the secondary piece of that is where you are able to have other people around and communicate with them on a very different plane, different level. Some would say a different dimension, and you're
Mhm.
just like, yeah, like, I don't know who this person is. I really don't care. Like, I see them, right? They see
Mhm.
me, I see them, and in that time and space, like that's the I think we miss a lot of the simple things with all of the noise today, right? Is like we don't just see people for who they are, which means we're not as willing to provide charity, to provide help, to be selfless, things of those natures, and
Mhm.
that's why I think this is one of those things that is just so damn important, is because I mean, if especially as people who are into peace and consent and liberty, like and obviously charity, this is our key. This is one of our tools in terms of helping other people see other people and not being so damn judgy, as we have become as a species in 2021.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing that I think is always important to point out when talking about psychedelics is that they're not always necessary to achieve a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. There are other ways to get there, and so I'm not pushing drugs on people and saying that you have to do psychedelics or else you'll never be the best person that you can be. That's not true. Um, and actually, one thing that has made me that definitely triggered something in my brain of gaining a lot more respect for Spike is because normally it's difficult for me to have like really lengthy conversations and like in-depth conversations with a sober person when I'm tripping. And it's hard for them to kind of match the vibe and like slow down a little bit and get deep and have that like deep intellectual conversation. But Spike was matching us in that entire room completely sober. No, because he is sober. So like no weed, no alcohol, no mushrooms. All of us were fucked up. And he was like completely matching the vibe and able to go as deep with the rest of us. And that's something that you just don't encounter all that often.
No, and I'll tell you what. I mean, he is a very gifted person, just in general. I mean, if you've ever been around Spike,
Hmm.
he's a great guy to be around. He's got a great energy, and he's obviously just naturally at peace. And you're right. You're like that's not a common place these days. I think you probably find it in our circles a lot more than you find it in a lot of other circles.
Hmm.
But for sure, there's something special about that guy, and really about the group of people that can kind of get together and be like, oh, you know what? I don't care what you're doing or what you're not doing, right? And you're
Right.
cool, I'm cool. We can be cool, kind of deal. So, yeah, it's yeah, I mean, the LP Michigan convention, great time, great place, amazing people.
Mhm.
And I don't know, speaks to my homeland, David. You know what I mean? Like good times.
Yeah. Uh, so that which also kind of leads into the other main thing I wanted to talk about was I feel like the growth that I've achieved in my own mindset over the last, let's say, year and a half to almost 2 years now, um, has greatly increased my understanding for libertarian values and like anarchy as a philosophy.
Mhm.
Uh, and so I think that there's a really important aspect of like freeing yourself first before you can free other people. And I was wondering if you had similar thoughts or had anything to add to that.
Yeah, I will tell you, when this opened my mind, right? It began with questions. I think I had more questions than answers every time, which being inquisitive to where you'll work at finding answers is what grows obviously those little wrinkles in your brain. And sometimes leads you to new questions or new answers. But it did something for me as well. I mean, besides just, I mean, the creativity. I mean, just like a tsunami, right? Like the what you wanted to get out to share with the world that was going on, where you were no longer
Mhm.
afraid of it, right? Like that barrier of being afraid of what other people thought, like, yeah, that's not a thing anymore. Like, I don't care. It's not that your opinions don't have some weight. Like, you obviously, you're a human being, and so you're relevant. But in terms of getting inside my OODA loop, between my ears, man, that's sacred space now. And what I'm putting out there, you don't have to pick it up. You can pick it up. You can criticize us all you want, but to break that barrier down to where you just don't give a shit anymore, for the right reasons, and you're not afraid to share what's in your mind and your soul, like those type of things, I think are not only freeing, but in terms of the creative path, the sharing of something that you will work tirelessly at over and over and over and over, right? You'll start a podcast, you'll start running for an office to share ideas, not with the bent of being successful in power, but in terms of sharing your experience with other people, and your ideas with other people, which I think is really what is so amazing. I mean, Ron Paul, not that I think that Ron Paul ever did psychedelics. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I don't know. He kind of was a man in the 60s.
I want to trip mushrooms with Ron Paul. That is now going on the bucket list.
That'd be great, wouldn't it? Or I mean, just have a big fat J with him or some edibles. But whatever the case is, right? But he's like, he said, when an idea's time has come, it can't be stopped by any person, any government, any army. And that's the power of the ideas that we're putting out there, right? Like these ideas are powerful because they cannot be stopped. And I think like to relate to our earlier conversation is, I think that's one of the reasons why they are absolutely forbidden, and you can get caged and killed for touching plants and fungus, right? Like, or taking in them. But it's that power comes from being naturally truthful. And when it's naturally, natural truth is a fire, because it just absolutely keeps people who can't approach that truth at bay. And if it keeps it at bay, because they can't stand in that fire, man, that's something that they will try to ignore as long as they can out there. And it's something that gives you an amazing projection of, such ideas.
So I want to call back to a specific phrase that you said in that answer, because you said people who don't give a shit for the right reasons. And I'm wondering if you can clarify that a little bit.
So you don't give a shit for the right reasons. How do I clarify? Like, I think you have to come to peace in this world with, you're not going to be everybody's cup of tea, right? And that's okay. Like, you shouldn't be everybody's cup of tea. We all come from very different places. This gets down to individuality, right? So if you're not for everybody, well, that just means everybody's not for you either. But I'm cool with that, because as long as it's like, it's cliche to say it, but it's true. It's like, man, you're not hurting people and you're not taking people's stuff. I don't give a shit what you do, man. Like, you can lick cats' asses for all I give a damn. Not my thing, right? But like, if that's your deal, I don't care. At the end of the day, I mean, cat, I like it or not. If it's animal abuse, I don't know. But like, that's I think that that point where you get to the, like, you're just that person that is unfazed, and I'm not saying the outer world doesn't take its toll, depending on where you're at, but there is this place that you get very comfortable with being, that I think scares the shit out of people who aren't seers, who don't know, and who haven't been able to let go, right? Like that's where, we were talking earlier, is the ability to let go. Is you learn to translate that into your normal everyday life. It's very stoic, right? It's kind of the foundation of stoicism is change what you can. It's okay to dream, and it's okay to act on dreams and all those kind of things. But at the end of the day, like, if you're going to be mad about dumb shit that you have absolutely zero power to change right then and there, why, right? Like
Mhm.
life's too damn short for that kind of thing. So I think that's where the zero fucks comes from in terms of what other people think.
I take it. One of the main realizations I remember coming to this year on a mushroom trip. And I actually, thankfully, I have like an 11-minute recording of myself talking to myself from this trip, which I just re-listened to for the first time like 2 or 3 weeks ago. But it was probably like a 6 month at least build up to this realization where I had been building up this dichotomy in my mind of like the put together charismatic leader that like has things planned out, knows what the fuck is going on, all of that stuff. And then the kind of like calm, uh, go with the flow personality, maybe like a Ram Dass style, just like chill. And actually, I had a really great conversation with a close friend of mine, and we were talking about personality types, and she was going through a breakout that I had never heard of before, with the personality types. It was like numbers, and she pointed me out as the one that was characteristically like flaky, unreliable, and like all of these things that I am sometimes, but I'm like really, really actively had been trying for years to like be more of that put together person. And specifically in my friendship with her, I had really tried to not let any of that part of it through. I've been reliable. And but then later on, she starts reading off like people who are these personality types, and one of them was Ram Dass. And she was like, just because they have this personality type has a tendency to do these negative things doesn't mean like you definitely are flaky and unreliable. It just means that you're more tend to like you have more of a likelihood of going that way. And it kind of like broke down a lot of that dichotomy. And then I was struggling with that and did a mushroom trip like maybe 2 weeks later and kind of came to a real realization that it's not a necessary dichotomy. And I think that plays into a little bit of what we're talking about here of like that go with the flow mentality doesn't necessarily mean that you can't have your shit together. Because is my point. Like as a party, we don't have to be so like, oh yeah, you do you, man, that we don't run a successful party. Like as a candidate, you don't have to be so easygoing that you can't like demand things of your volunteers and your staff. Like you can still work that. And maybe you're not the most go with the flow kind of person anyway. You still have those libertarian ideals, but you're still really structured. You have a great place as a campaign manager or something like that, because most of the candidates suck at that shit.
Yeah, well, I mean, and think about where we're trying to go too, though. And maybe this is a 2 point factor in terms of, we as libertarians are trying to remove this metastasized cancer that is the state from our lives, right? And so, for one, when we're successful, what we're going to see is what we're seeing now. We're going to see a collapse. We're going to see this distrust in institutions and centralization and authority and people that hurt people and cage people and kill people. Like we're seeing all of this. I mean, and I don't think as libertarians we take enough pause to see, this, this time, which has been hard because change is hard for humans. It's naturally hard. We're very stick to a type of creatures, right? So, I'd like for people to sit there and take a little bit of homage, a little bit of umbrage and say, like, listen, we are seeing an empire collapse right now. And it's not because, you know, the state isn't doing what it has always done. Jesus Christ, it's doing everything that it's always done and then some, right? Like they're the most well-funded empire that the world's ever seen. They're doing everything that
Mhm.
they possibly can this time around to stop this damn thing from crumbling to keep their power. And every day you just see more and more and more distrust. I mean, Donald Trump was absolutely hated. Joe Biden is hated. The difference is, a lot of times the press is covering for, guys in, the quote unquote Democratic Party versus where you've got 80 to 90% negative type of news for, guys in the Republican Party. The bottom line is like, great. Either way, their numbers are at rock bottom. And at the end of the day, if we're successful, what we're looking at is these guys don't exist or they have no power. Either way, like, we're successful. And I think a lot of people in the Libertarian Party still see success as power. I think they still see success as having seats of power. And I mean, I don't see it that way. I see it as use their own silly system to gain as much traction for the ideas of, liberty as possible. And if we're doing our damn jobs in those arenas, well, all you're going to see is more and more of what we're seeing now. You're going to see this absolute catastrophe of an empire implode amongst itself. And I mean, look around, people. Like, you're doing it. Like, we're doing this. We don't have to be, great at running campaigns. We just have to get out in front of people, plant seeds, and let those people go on and dig, scratch, inquire and teach themselves. Because let's face it, most of us, that's how we did it, right? Like, you didn't become an anarchist or an anarcho-capitalist overnight. It came with like lots of really, really long hours of reading, of listening, of study, of scratching at itches and answering questions, and to get back to kind of the psilocybin side or the psychedelic side, a lot of that is spurred by opening your mind to maybe other people's ideas, other people's culture, other people's thoughts and ideas. I mean, if you can open your mind and try to see perspectives where you're not trying to win conversations, you're trying to learn from conversations, man, we are so much further down the road. I think libertarians need to start looking at, okay, well, when we finally get there, which I think we're going to see it in the very near future, is like, all right, now what? Right? Like, now what? Right?
Yeah.
What are we planning for in that time and space?
Lots of psilocybin.
I mean, yeah, it's like, how do we perpetuate a culture? How do we perpetuate this glue that is humanity? And I'm telling you, I've got some ideas. I really like. I in the next, I don't know, probably 6 months, I have some gigantic ideas about this kind of stuff. And I mean, I can't wait. Like, I am so excited about what our opportunity is right now.
Well, I'll definitely have to have you on for a part 3. But I really appreciate the point that you were making there about like homage to the time that we're in and the opportunity that we have, and you said earlier how like insignificant of a blimp we are on the timeline. There's been plenty of empire collapses along the history of the US. A bunch of people have been in places during exciting times, but we're in one of those really exciting times. And I think really interestingly, like my generation, we grew up on movies and books like Harry Potter, Percy Jackson, Star Wars is for my generation plus the one before mine. And so we grew up on these, like, the youth and the rebels, like overcoming the evil, like, control state, whether it's the church or the state or just the bad teachers, whatever thing it is. Like, we, especially these last 2 generations, were raised on that. And I think there's a really interesting correlation there that kind of speaks to this whole conversation, where in all of those series, especially like Star Wars or Harry Potter or Percy Jackson, the heroes always do something that the other good guys think is bad at the beginning. Like Luke gets laughed at for trying to be a Jedi. When they start doing like Dumbledore's army in Harry Potter, they're researching a whole bunch of magic that the school would never allow them to be taught. Like, they're always step outside of the bounds of normalcy to actually finally overcome the big bad guy. And I would say that entheogenic medicine is kind of that for us. Like, we're seeing it a lot with weed. We're now seeing it with stuff like, especially psilocybin and MDMA have gotten, I think, the most study and the most like significant. Ketamine is kind of coming up there. There's been a lot of studies there. Like, we're really seeing how we can step outside of these mental blocks that we've had for centuries, and we kind of have that special kind of magic, or the force, if you will.
Think about all these convergences, right? And that's really what you're looking at. I mean, I think you nailed a lot of the pop culture stuff for us. I mean, we were even my generation. I mean, I know I'm probably about a decade older at least, but it's one of those things where, growing up, it was He-Man and GI Joe and Transformers, as cartoons. And now that I've got kids, and we've adopted all the comic stuff from the pages of the comics into the actual on-screen type of stuff. Like, you're right, and especially the Harry Potter, like, no doubt about it. Like, you make a tremendous point in terms of when these things start to make sense to others. That's where that bell curve comes along, right? You've got your pioneers, you got your early adopters, and then comes the crowd. And I think we're actually on that uptick right now. And to anybody and everybody that ever fought for the the rights of people to consume and enjoy, to take these deep spiritual awakenings with cannabis and psilocybin in this nation. My eternal gratitude to each and every one that has stayed the course and fought for those things. And I don't think it's any coincidence that as these things have become more prevalent in our society, we've also come to this point where more and more people are questioning the society, at least the power, this masquerading Wizard of Oz that's behind the curtain, right? So, yeah, man, I think the one thing that you hit on that I think we should maybe talk even more about is, you got to stop asking permission. That's the thing, is with people who are the heroes in all of these stories, you know, they were doing things that were considered illegal or wrong or outlawed or any of those type of things. And you look back at history, I mean, that's really, the people who done the great, the great things, the great accomplishments for freedom. Not only did they, not ask for permission, they basically gave the middle finger to the authority and said, come stop me. I dare you. Right? Like, that's our power, man. Like, that's our damn superpower, if we've got one, is the ability to communicate this clearly to people, and take a lot of risk, right? Because, I mean, let's face it, if we don't, there's not going to be any reward for us. We're just going to bend a knee and then get on the train and get in the ovens and whatever, right? It's like, no, man, like, this is not going to happen to another generation. If I have anything to do with it, no. Like, we're going to do things differently, and we're going to do things peacefully, and we're going to do things that are going to change society for the better without asking permission anymore.
Hell yeah. Yeah, and to land this plane with the back to the Harry Potter reference and a little bit of a call to action, I think, to what I was saying, like, a lot of us grew up reading these books and getting excited, and like, I can't tell you how many times I've had the exact thought reading one of those books of like, I wish I lived in X universe or an X time period. I also was a big fan of like World War II, kind of like semi-fictional books when growing up.
Sure.
So I was like, oh, if only I lived there and could like be a war hero, blah 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 blah. Very very quickly grew out of that one, thank God.
Smarter than I was, that's for sure.
Well, I won't say quickly. It was probably like 16. I was close, but
I think I was like 24, so you nailed it.
But so, and I think a lot of people grew up with those similar mentalities of like, I wish I was in this situation and I could be part of Dumbledore's army. But what we're finding is that most people wouldn't join Dumbledore's army. They might not join like Umbridge's little Inquisitors Club, whatever. Maybe they're not ratting on their friends about like not having their masks on or whatever, but they're not joining the group that's learning the important stuff to fight the important fight. They're just kind of sitting around and they're chilling out. When I'm saying that, I don't think the Libertarian Party is Dumbledore's army in this narrative that I'm saying. There are a lot of people who are dues paying members and have been for a long time that are not in to that level where they're actually like really trying to fight the fight. And a lot of people are still kind of paying homage to the system as it is, like you said. They're still trying to just get that power, and they're not trying to actually change the world. And we need more people trying to change the world.
I agree wholeheartedly, man. I think I mean, I want to share a little bit. I mean, I know we've got a little bit of time here. I've got some plans, especially I hit on some post-traumatic stress in my show this week. As I had experienced for my days in the Marine Corps and all that kind of stuff, and kind of around the whole Rittenhouse trial, and not to bring any of that into it, but what I would love to do is take a bunch of people who have had post-traumatic stress, and if they're inclined to go down these paths, is introduce them, show them, take them out, especially the warriors. And the thing is like I said, you don't have to have had military experience like to be a warrior, right? There are a lot of people who escaped that life because they knew better than to go join the military. A lot of us are had to go and see it firsthand to have that realization. But to take these people and show them a different type of spirituality that they were ever told, to have them come together and now be that Dumbledore army, right, so to speak, right? These people that would do anything and draw a line in the sand, hoping, demanding for the ideas of peace to be recognized amongst people. I think that's going to have just this giant effect. And I don't think it's going to be, I know there are already places where this is going on. I know it's not going on around me yet. But here in Appalachia, man, that's one of the things that I want to start leading. And it's one of those things that I want to decentralize to the point where this is going on in, homes and wild areas all around, this this planet, to for lack of a bigger dreams, just to start here, to be able to do that, to take people and show them the ways to where people just continue to introduce more and more people to this very loving system of ideas and charity. And man, I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, but God Almighty, I mean, it looks like we've got a heck of a ramp up right now to kind of affect a lot of that change. And if we can shove it into overdrive by taking action, stop asking permission, and just say, no, we're going to do this and we're peaceful. And if you screw around with us, you're the bad guy, obviously.
Hell yeah. Shane, thanks so much for coming on. This was great. The show, like this episode could have broken tradition from the show. It's normally a lot more tangible and actionable, like how to start a pack, how to do graphic design kind of stuff. But I think that this episode, I'm really glad. I think it still stayed on brand. Like this was all like really tangible, actionable, like advice on how to live a better life and to promote freedom and liberty. Before we wrap up, I definitely want to give you a chance to shout out how people can follow you, how people can get involved with all the things that you're working on, watch your show, pitch everything that you're doing.
David, first and foremost, man, humbled to hang out with you again, man. Thanks for having me on and to talk about something, to give me a platform to talk about something that a lot of people would be scared to talk about on their show, man. I think it takes a lot of courage. So from the bottom of my heart, thanks for having me on. Anybody can find me at all the links and everything that I'm doing at radicalpod.com. One of the big things I'm working on right now is the Helios Initiative. to further decentralize and localize and nullify all the nonsense that's come into your local areas through the mayors and through your sheriffs. So we had our first win down here in Holly Springs in my county, where we nullified civil asset forfeiture. So we've got a working model. That tab, if anybody's interested, it has 4 proclamations up. You can basically copy, paste, and go down and demand it of your sheriffs and mayors, and not wait on the judicial and not wait on the legislator to change things, take action, and stop asking permission. So thanks again, David, for having me on, bud.
My pleasure. Definitely have to have you back on for part 3 sometime. Guys, thanks so much for watching. If you haven't already, like this video, share it. Go to radicalpod.com and follow and or subscribe however it works on whichever social media platform. Literally everything for Shane, and watch all of his stuff. He's amazing. We'll be back here next week with Matt Wright. Later this week on Free Speech Media, we'll be having a re-airing of Libertarians Launching Platforms with Jess Mears, so check that out. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, keep up the fight.